Imagine a major political party that for decades keeps flirting with its most extreme elements.
hmm
They think they can harness all that energy for, short-term gain. They keep telling themselves, we've got this under control.
And then it happens.
Exactly. The extremists aren't just at the door anymore. They've taken over the whole house.
That really provocative idea is at the heart of our conversation today, which is centered on David Corn's political history, American Psychosis.
Right. His whole argument is that the political crises we're seeing now, even something as big as the January 6th attack, they're not some flash in the pan.
No, he says they are the predictable result of 70 years of very specific choices.
So today we're going to unpack Corn's sources to explore his argument that Trumpism is really a culmination, not a break from the past.
And specifically, how party elites, for decades, chose to weaponize extremism for electoral gain. To get into that, we have to start with what Corn calls the long Faustian bargain.
That sounds ominous.
It is. Corn claims that going all the way back to the 1950s, GOP leaders made a strategic choice, again and again,
A choice to do what?
to mobilize the energy of, well, extremist, racist, and conspiratorial groups, make McCarthyism, the John Birch Society, segregationists, instead of pushing them to the margins.
So it was a kind of transactional alliance.
Absolutely. It was all about grassroots energy and resources. The key example he uses to show how this all started is Barry Goldwater's 1964 campaign.
Okay.
Goldwater flat out refused to disavow the John Birch Society and segregationists. And this wasn't, a slip-up. It was a cold, hard political calculation.
Because those groups offered that intensity, that passion.
And crucial funding. Corn argues this was the moment that really normalized the alliance between mainstream conservatism and, well, a kind of paranoid extremism.
And that's the key part of his argument, isn't it? It pushes back on the idea that this is just the base going crazy.
Exactly. Corn places the agency, the responsibility, squarely on party elites who chose short-term wins by stoking grievance and fear.
It raises some big questions about the moral responsibility of political leadership.
It does. So if the elites made that choice, how did those ideas, those conspiracies, take root with so many people? This gets us to Corn's second insight, the American Psychosis.
And he's using psychosis as a metaphor here, of course.
Right, not a literal clinical diagnosis. He's describing a kind of social condition where large parts of the public are living inside a completely alternate reality.
One built on fear and conspiracy theories.
Yes, whether it's fears about communism in the 50s or racial and cultural anxieties today, but that reality needs an engine to keep it running.
And that's where the media comes in.
Oh, absolutely. Corn points to figures like Rush Limbaugh and later Fox News and argues they didn't just report on outrage, they industrialized it. They turned it into a business.
They made suspicion and grievance into a coherent 24/7 identity.
Exactly. It trained the audience to see politics not as a disagreement over policy, but as an existential war, a fight where your opponents are just morally illegitimate.
It's a powerful case study in media literacy, how constant fear filtered through these information silos can just completely erode the shared reality that a democracy needs to even function.
And that erosion leads directly to Corn's conclusion about our recent history. He is adamant that Donald Trump did not hijack a healthy political party.
He just crystallized what was already there.
He is the embodiment of tendencies that had been cultivated for decades.
But you hear the both sides argument all the time, that both parties indulge their extremes. How does Corn deal with that framing?
He's very clear on this. He argues there is simply no symmetric counterpart in the Democratic Party's leadership for this kind of sustained, decades-long indulgence of violent fantasy as a core organizing principle.
So for him, January 6th wasn't a surprise.
It was the apotheosis, the violent, logical endpoint of rewarding grievance politics for years and years, something you saw with Trump's embrace of movements like birtherism.
So where does that leave us? What's the way out?
Well, Corn calls for something he terms a civic popular front. It's this idea of a broad alliance of citizens who all agree on one basic thing.
Which is?
That violent, anti-democratic, and overtly bigoted movements have to be politically isolated. They have to be contained.
So the goal isn't to crush dissent, but to sort of quarantine the really destructive impulses.
Exactly. While still recognizing the humanity of the people who get caught up in them.
I think the book really forces you, as a listener, to confront a pretty difficult thought. If the structural incentives in our system, the quick access to money and energy, actually reward leaders who undermine democratic norms,
Then just changing the personalities at the top isn't going to fix it.
the mechanism itself is broken. Which leaves us with a final, really provocative question for you to think about.
Where should a democracy draw a non-negotiable line? What specific beliefs or actions should disqualify a movement from being treated as a normal political player?
And perhaps the hardest part, who gets to decide that?